Florida already has the highest LGBTQ suicide rate of any state. And queer teens are 4 times more likely to commit suicide. And they know that, because I said that and I was one of hundreds that said that, testifying in the Senate and the House of Representatives. I went door to door talking to senators and representatives, Republican and Democrat, telling them these statistics and telling them personal stories. They heard me, they listened, and they voted for it anyways, because they know what they're doing and they are trying to kill us.
Address this bill, because, you know, you hear from supporters of it just basically the talking point, well, what's wrong with not teaching sexual ideology or identity in such younger grades? But to me, because I read the bill, it seems to be quite more than that.
Yes, we call it the Don't Say Gay bill because it prohibits classroom instruction or inclusion of LGBTQ people, particularly sexual orientation or gender identity. So they're really singling us out, our community out, and they have said that really in so much of the rhetoric and their defense of the Don't Say Gay bill.
Florida already has really strict and conservative guidelines on sex ed to begin with. Sex ed is even mandated in Florida schools. And if you do teach it, it has to be abstinence emphasized. It has to be posted on your school district's website, and parents can opt out. And so it's very, very conservative already, and there is no conversation of sexual activity happening in K-3. And when we brought up an amendment, when a Republican filed an amendment to change the language from sexual orientation and gender identity to sexual activity, it was denied. And the Republican sponsor said that would gut the purpose of the bill, because the purpose of the bill is to target and attack and harass and belittle and erase LGBTQ plus identity. It's not about sexual activity.
I have read the bill, because that's what all the critics say when you push back. Oh, you haven't read the bill. You don't know what it's about. And I'm like, I read everything. I'm a lawyer. I read everything. So basically, the bill says that from K through 3 or age appropriate, you cannot have discussion about sexual orientation or gender identity. So the conversation then becomes, well, we don't want, the conversation with the Republicans is, we don't want to talk about sexual things. Okay, I can understand that. That's fine. So when we have offered amendments to say, listen, like, you don't want to talk about sexual things, then let's just say human sexuality, period. So that covers everything. That covers heterosexual relationships and sex. That covers same-sex relationships and sex. Well, I think that takes away from the intent of the bill. So then that brings me back to the question, what is the intent of the bill? If the intent is really not to talk about sexual things, our amendments would have been accepted.
It's like you have this friend that's sitting at the table with you, and they're like, I don't like your sandwich. It's my sandwich. You're not going to eat my sandwich, are you? You have your own sandwich. Just eat your own sandwich. Don't care about my sandwich. Like, that's my sandwich. I'm going to eat it. I'm not putting it in your mouth. I'm not forcing you to eat my sandwich. You can go sit at another table and eat your sandwich with your other rude sandwich-hating friends, okay? Well, I sit at my table with my sandwich-loving friends that will eat the same sandwich as me, okay? Don't judge my sandwich.
And you can sit at the same table
You can.
and not care about what somebody else's sandwich is.
Yep.
And still be friends and still be respectful. And even if you don't like it, respect.
You have all these corporations that put the LGBTQ flag in their windows. Disney, Comcast, AT&T, but they give a ton of money to the sponsors of this bill, and Disney, they basically were forced to react to this.
Disney is a particularly upsetting one, but Pride capitalism as a whole is so disturbing. Pride was a protest. It was a beg for liberation. And these companies will show up at Pride events with their little booths and little like Pride merchandise with their logo on it, and like Disney will make however much money and then donate to these anti-LGBTQ politicians and not pull their weight and make a difference when they need to.
Can you talk about the Democratic Party here? Because they're, to me, not just in Orlando, but St. Pete, Tampa, Miami, they're taking a lot of the same money and then making excuses why we can't do rent control and things like that.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Sometimes I feel like the culture wars also give Democrats cover. Because imagine if there were no culture wars and you were just voting on economic issues or regulatory issues, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
If you don't think like him, if you don't look like him, if you don't act like him, or even have the financial security. I mean, and I think that what kills me is when, especially, here in Florida, especially in rural areas, when people who are economically challenged vote against their interests. I'm like, this man doesn't care. Donald Trump doesn't care about you. He cares about your vote to get him to where he needs to be. But he doesn't, because if he cared, he would make it easier for you.
Mm. But isn't that on the Democrats?
I mean,
isn't it on the Democrats if you're not giving them enough on the bread and table? Well, I think you nailed it, because if you have a Republican Party that's viewed as fighting and exciting their base, even though they're fighting for terrible things. And you have a Democratic Party where there's only a couple progressives within that party fighting for affordable housing, while the rest of the party is taking money from Disney and real estate developers and basically corrupt. People are just going to vote for the Republicans, and there's a lot of people that will just sit it out because they're like, I know the Republicans are bad, but what are the Democrats doing to help my life?
The Democrats and the Republicans aren't even that different when it comes to the political spectrum, as a whole. Yeah. And Republicans are going farther and farther right, and Democrats are saying, we should become more center to appeal to them. No, you should go farther left, and we need to mobilize, and we need to, exactly. We need to get people energized. We need to get people involved. They have created such an intense, frightening base of people, and we need to be able to counter that with the same energy,
maybe
except
not frightening, but
not frightening and not
more
dangerous, but. And not cult-like,
though. Yeah, no,
but more action-based instead of old and useless.
Basically, Disney in many ways has bought Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with the type of politicians that we have in power, right? From the local level, the state level, even to the national level. And what we see is corporations like Disney, and Disney's one of the biggest ones, but definitely not the only one, especially here in Central Florida, that takes advantage of these politicians, owns a lot of them, and pushes them to a place where they're getting these $2 billion tax cuts, where they're getting a lot of these big tax incentives to do what they have already been doing, right? A lot of times it's not like they are getting these tax incentives and hiring a bunch of people full-time, good dignified wages, good benefits and everything like that. Our unions have to fight for that after the fact a lot of the times. And so that's pretty much what we see here. And it's not just Disney. We can take a step back and look at it from a bird's eye view, and we see it happening with Big Sugar here in Florida, with the sugar industry that's completely unchecked, and fossil fuel industry here in Florida. And it's creating a situation where essentially these companies are being rewarded for polluting our environment.
It's an emergency. The rent and housing prices are out of control. They've gone up 30 to 50%, and wages have not gone up nearly enough. In addition to dealing with all the other inflation, gas prices are skyrocketing, the price of food, and the working class that are the backbone of the Orlando economy cannot afford to live here. And instead of spending money on affordable housing and transit and the stuff our working class need, we're providing corporate subsidies to places like Disney, Universal, and the developers, like you mentioned. They're buying out city council, they're buying the commissioners and getting whatever they want. And we, the people, are suffering.
I don't know what their measurement is that the economy is going up.
It's rich people. They say the economy, that's a euphemism for the rich, It's like working people aren't doing well here. And like Jack was saying, they said they have to renovate because our apartments become a slum pretty much. They haven't been taking care of it. That's a big problem that we're seeing here too, is all these slumlords, and the city's not doing anything about it. But meanwhile, the city codes department will go after, homeowners in the black neighborhoods and, give them fines because their grass is too long or whatever the case may be. But then, our landlord's able to get away with, mold everywhere.
The story is so genuine. It was so heart-touching because it's a whole lot bigger than black and white. This is a 14-year-old child. That could have been anybody's child. That was put in a police car and kidnapped and abandoned on the side of the road. Like some old roadkill. And when I signed for my child was dead. All right? The last time he was alive, he was in the sheriff's custody. The sheriff released him to nobody. Not his mama, not his daddy, not a coach, not a reverend, nobody. He's dead. And the last place we seen him was in your custody.